live from Venice, California. This is Against the Stream. My name is Jason Murphy. This is Wednesday night, Dharma Talk, meditation and Dharma Talk. So glad you're all here. Those of you who is there anyone new? Anyone new to the group or new to this evening or to Against the Stream in general that would like to introduce themselves? You just need to unmute yourself if you want to. Okay. Any holdouts? A few more people might come in. Looks like the same usual suspects, which I enjoy. I like that there's a bit of a crew that kind of has been showing up regularly on Wednesdays, and hopefully you guys are also checking out Noah's. I think Noah's doing a group with his book, Heart of the Revolution, which in my opinion is his best book. I have found it to be extremely useful in my own practice and understanding, and so check him out on Mondays. And then there's Ward, who's throwing the Dharma gauntlet down on Fridays, and then we have who I totally forgot her name, Savage. Why did I forget?
Rachel, twice a day. Rachel, twice a week.
Rachel, twice a week. Rachel Savage. I cannot believe I spaced on her name. Anyway, that happens. That's the age. Although meditation is supposed to stop you from getting Alzheimer's or dementia. Did you know that? It actually can rebuild parts of your brain, which would make you susceptible. But that's kind of another story. Anyway, welcome to those of you that were here. So we're going to meditate for a bit, and then I'm going to introduce. So I actually was looking for the book No Religion by Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, but I think I gave it away. But this is the Handbook for Mankind by Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. It's probably from the mid 80s. I don't know that it's still available, but it might be for free, download or something. So I'll kind of intro Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, some of my experiences with his teachings and practice. We'll talk a little bit about the first part of this book. Actually, kind of recaps his other book, No Religion. So we'll be talking about that. I think the title of this talk will be "What is What," which is a term for the Dharma. So we'll go ahead, let's just sit for a time and get a little meditation in, and then we'll go from there. So finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, that allows you to be relaxed and alert. And so we'll just settle in. In this meditation, this time, this practice, I'm going to focus primarily just on the breath, breathing or breath practice. And so there's two sets of instructions that I'll give. The first set is aim, connect, and sustain. And then after a time, I'll shift to my instructions that you guys have probably all heard before, which is relax, observe, and allow. Hearing the bell. So let's settle in. So the first set of instructions, aiming the attention towards this experience of breathing. And just take a moment and see where the attention kind of naturally rests when it comes to the experience of breathing. There's a few options. There's the tip of the nose, the nostrils, the upper lip. There's the chest, the expansion and contraction of the chest. There's the belly, the rise and fall of the belly. So connect to whatever area, whatever anchor within the breath feels natural. And the idea there is to then sustain the connection for as long as possible, knowing full well that the attention will wander off, knowing full well that the mind can be a busy place, and there can be thoughts, and there can be sounds, and there can be stories, and there can be sensations of the body, and all the sense doors. And it's totally not a problem. It's just part of this moment to moment experience. But if we can, try to narrow the focus down, aim, connect, and sustain. Each breath, each moment. Really supporting the awareness or the attention to stay with the experience of breathing, beginning, middle, end of each breath. Of course, if we recognize that the attention wanders off, it's not a problem. Just acknowledging where the attention has gone, future, past. Kind of taking a glimpse away from the breath, seeing where the mind has gone, and then with a sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, aiming the attention back, intentionally connecting to the experience of breathing at one of the contact points. And then sustain that attention for as long as possible. Again and again, repeating this process. Aim, connect, sustain. Each breath, each moment. Adding a sense of curiosity, gentle investigation of the experience of breathing. If you can, see if you can pinpoint the point of contact. Smaller, more refined, without constricting. Aim, connect, sustain, over and over, breath by breath. again and again, recognizing when the attention wanders off, and with a sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, aiming the attention back, connecting to the experience of breathing, and sustaining that connection for as long as possible. Noticing what's present in the mind, Shifting the attention for a moment to observe thoughts, stories, moods, sleepiness, agitation, restlessness, worry, fantasy. Just acknowledging what's present there with a sense of friendliness and kindness with the mind, relaxing into the new breath, observing what's present in the heart, in the mind, in the different sense doors, and allowing whatever's present to stay for a time and pass away, as all things do. Relax, observe, allow. Again and again. Relax, observe, allow each breath, each moment. With each breath, the invitation is to allow the mind and the body to soften, to relax. Here, now. Relax, observe, allow each breath, each moment. Hmm. So perhaps just take a moment and reflect for yourself. What was that like? In how many different ways was it different? Did it change? Did it start off one way and end a different way? What did you notice? And specifically, so to just kind of open up for some questions or sharing about what it is that you noticed about this last 30 minutes. If anyone wants to share specifically about the meditation. Or any question about the instruction. Okay, moving on. Hopefully you guys are all still awake. Especially those of you guys on the East Coast. I got mad love for you on staying up till 10:30 or whatever, Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
If I could,
All right.
I do have a reflection, um, and thank you for being our guide and to your service all the time. I find there's less. I'm not contesting things in meditation and allow, connect, sustain, or recognize, allow, observe. I mean, I'm probably getting it wrong, but in that too, like I'm probably getting it wrong. Like I'm trying to be less judgmental too, like toward myself, towards others when I'm in the meditation. And I think I can just watch things pass, come and go, no matter what the feeling tone. And I like what you said about how many changes did you feel within the meditation? Because I felt a lot, a significant amount of different things coming and going. Because I'm not jabbing them off.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm not trying to jab them off and then hit them with a right. I'm just allowing. And that opens the door to a lot of different feeling tones. And more than ever, like being friendly or kind to yourself during that process, is huge. And not being judgmental and not beating myself up or not forming a committee or a trial, or just allowing and sitting in that awareness and allowing it, and then taking in all of the feeling tones. And I liked during the meditation when you were like, okay, let it come ahead of the breath and just look at it and then drop back in and, do the breath. So yeah, that's my reflection. Thank you as well.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else about this particular meditation in the last 30 minutes or so? Just reflecting on what you noticed. All right, well, I'll talk for a while and then we'll open back up to some Q&A or some discussion. As I mentioned before, so to me, I mean, there's several really influential teachers that I've had. And one of the things that I've always appreciated, first of all, about kind of Noah's teaching and style of teaching and the kind of against the stream, and really actually the kind of larger, insight meditation practice, and even Theravada in Buddhism and the the monastics really follow this kind of many teachers, that it's not like you have one root guru and that's your go-to, that's your main teacher and that's your only teacher and you have to be dedicated to that teacher, because that shit didn't work for me. That felt like dogma. It feels like coercion. I think people change. I think, so, from my first teacher to my, current teacher, I've had many, many influential teachers, and some of them I've never met. Many of them I have met, but some of them I've never met. Within the Thai forest lineage, within the Thai forest tradition, there are kind of two kind of masters, meditation masters that have stood out and stood the test of time. And in the northeast is Ajahn Chah. Ajahn Chah, who was one of the first Thai meditation masters to invite international students and create an international English-speaking sangha, monastery that anyone can go to, and everything is primarily in English, unless some of the villagers come and then they give some teachings in Thai. But so there's Ajahn Chah, and then in the south there is a meditation master named Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. And they both were kind of rebellious and have been, rebellious and inspired rebellion in a sense, in their own ways. Ajahn Chah sticking very close to the kind of Thai forest monastic tradition, and simple and deep, and not a lot of Dharma study, didn't read all the books. Ajahn Chah started, ordained at, I can't remember exactly, but he was young. He ordained young. And then he, because there was some pressure to live life a little bit, I think he was 8 or 10 or something like that when he actually ordained. And then he had some pressure to disrobe, and he did. He disrobed to kind of see what he was missing. And very quickly he realized that the only life that mattered was that of the monastic life. So he went back, and then for the rest of his life was a monk, and became a very well-known and influential teacher to many Western Dharma teachers. And then in the south, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, who kind of had a different upbringing. He was, again, ordained early, but ordained in the kind of scholastic practice. So he studied at the Bangkok Buddhist universities. He, studied Pali. He was very scholarly. And then he started to kind of even branch out to other kinds of philosophy and other types of Buddhism, not just Thai Buddhism. And then somewhere around his kind of 20s, or maybe even a little bit older, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, and he was teaching in the university. He was the professor, he was Professor Dumbledore or something like that, and he was teaching young monks. And then what he started to do was he started to kind of retranslate the Dharma the way that he had studied enough. He had studied different, the different kind of suttas and scriptures. And then he started to kind of give his own translations. And the Buddhist university was like, whoa, this means that. And he was like, well, I don't see it that way. I think through my practice, this means this, not that. And they were like, look, you have to teach the Dharma and translate the Dharma the way that we see fit. And he was like, fuck you, I'm out of here. So he bailed. I mean, there's more to it than that, but there was some back and forth. And then Buddhadasa Bhikkhu went back to his kind of hometown, which is in an area called Chaya, which is the larger part is called Suratthani in the kind of peninsula of Thailand. So I had the pleasure, had the fortune of going to Buddhadasa Bhikkhu's monastery called Wat Suan Mok. Wat means temple, Suan Mok means garden of liberation. And so let me just back up a little bit and say, so Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, being that kind of rebel that he was, also was very well known because he was a very scholarly monk, very well respected. And then when he stepped away, there were many monks that followed him. They went with him and they built a monastery. And what I love so much about Buddhadasa Bhikkhu's teaching is that it's very like going to his monastery, no Buddhas anywhere. There's no statues of the Buddha. There was no statues of the Buddha in the time of the Buddha. It didn't happen actually until 200 years after the Buddha died. No statues of the Buddha. There was no there wasn't ornamental. He had one room, like the statue room, that was like a kind of a museum where he would get all these gifts from other, monks and other schools and that you could go into that room and it was beautiful and it was, very well, laid out, and there was all kinds of beautiful gold Buddhas and emerald Buddhas and all these different kinds of statues. But everywhere else in the monastery, there was no statues, no kind of iconography. And in the meditation center where they allow Westerners to, at the, what is it, I think is the second Sunday of every month, if it's still this way, maybe it's the first Sunday of every month, they have a 10-day meditation retreat that anyone can go to. You just show up. And that's what I did. Without knowing anything about it, just having heard a little bit about where it is and how to get there. And what I found after being in another monastery, which was all kinds of iconography and thousands of Buddhas everywhere and very ritualistic and very kind of, culturally Thai Buddhist, what I found refreshing and insightful about Buddhadasa's approach is that Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, who taught in the late 70s, kind of early 80s, he taught some very influential, Guy Armstrong being one, Carol Armstrong being another, Carol Wilson. There's some of these very well-known Western Dharma teachers that trained under Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. And what I found, I found inspiration from their teachings, but what I also found is just in my own practice that what Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, and this is where I got the translation, Dharma meaning truth in nature. Because what Buddhadasa Bhikkhu believed, and he built his monastery in nature. It's not like a forest. It was like a jungly kind of area. And there was all kinds of animals, and everything was open air except for the jail cell of a room that I had. And like literally it was just looked like a jail cell. It was like a cement bed and a cement box with some bars for windows. But it was just such an amazing experience to go from a very kind of city monastery that was very busy and ritualistic, and there was people chanting and all this kind of stuff all the time, to this very kind of open air, natural, just quiet. I mean, there were still, like stray dogs everywhere, but and barking and fighting. But there was also a lot of space, and it was kind of in like this particular Swan Mok was in a coconut grove. So there was coconut trees everywhere. So during walking meditation, you do walking meditation in a coconut grove, which was very nice. So I spent some time there, and the primary teaching of Buddhadasa Bhikkhu practice-wise is what's called Anapanasati. Anapanasati means wisdom of the in and out breath. Mindfulness and wisdom of the in and out breath. Anapanasati. Ana means wisdom. No, sorry. Panya means wisdom. Ana means breath. So this was the practice, which was kind of what we did today, this narrowing the focus, getting very kind of precise, but in a relaxed way, not in a kind of rigid, like, stay focused on the breath. More of a, can I be curious? Can I refine the mind's attention on this experience of breathing? This is, mindfulness of breathing. And the wisdom that comes from that and the absorption that can come from that, you've heard me maybe describe it before, but it often is, and maybe some of you experience this, a calming, collecting of attention. And then when there's a calming and a collecting of attention, or it could be a collecting and a calming of attention, is actually probably more accurate. Then opening up to kind of all the sense doors and kind of what is being experienced present time can happen. And so I had some, amazing experiences, some painful experiences, but mostly just really enjoyed the teachings. I felt like there was much more kind of Dharma present. And the other thing is that Buddhadasa Bhikkhu wasn't like a zealot. Like, he wasn't like, this is the only way. And he actually, so he wrote a book called No Religion. And in that book, what he does is he describes the Dharma as not being beholden to a religion. It's like beyond religion. It's like there is no, it's like there's, sometimes you'll hear me say, the Dharma has room for it all. Like, everything can fit within the kind of expanse of the teachings of the Buddha. And mostly that's true. Also, the idea of no religion is him saying that he studied the Dharma and presented the Dharma in many ways. And I'll go through some of them. Kind of that's one of the ways he talked about is the many facets of Buddhism. Yeah. So what is what? I'm actually I'll read a little piece of this. What is what? Because this is a way that he kind of refines his teachings. Although maybe I didn't pick it up. Oh, he was also very critical. I'll have to find it in a second. He was very critical of the indoctrination of monasticism. And it's one of the cultural pieces that you'll find within Thailand, which I actually took part in, which is temporary ordination. And he was very kind of like, this isn't really what the Buddha taught. Like, the Buddha taught, if you're going to take the robes, then you take the robes, and you don't do it as a ceremony for like a bar mitzvah. It's like, and in some ways, it's kind of actually what has become what Buddhadasa Bhikkhu began to kind of critique and call, kind of neo-Buddhism, as actually a way to get donations to the monasteries, some of the monks, the city monks versus the kind of country monks, would perform these kind of rites and rituals that were, kind of basically created more and more religiosity around Buddhism itself. And that's found within a lot of different aspects of Buddhism. Anyway, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it because I didn't mark the page. But what is in some ways the Buddha's way of saying the truth of things, which is what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught, and the way it was described, and the way Buddhadasa Bhikkhu describes it, is that the Dharma teaches us what is happening within our experience, our every moment, that the truth is revealed. This idea of truth in nature is the truth to be experienced. And it's not my truth or your truth, but it's literally like kind of ultimate truth, like the truth to be seen only through your own experience, not as a doctrine, not as a this is what you must believe. And this is, as I'm sure you've heard us talk about, this is what the Buddha talked about. Looking at, the practice as the way or the liberation, not necessarily the doctrine. So what we now kind of call the Dharma or the Dhamma is like the books or the teachings. But in the time of the Buddha and for several hundred years after us, why nothing was written down is because the Dharma or the Dhamma was to be inspired or discovered through the practice within your own heart and mind. And so that's the kind of liberating factor. And so Buddhadasa Bhikkhu was very kind of, he didn't write a lot of books actually, but he was very into that. That was his thing, is see for yourself through this very simple practice of anapanasati, all will be revealed. And you will find out just what is what. And he would kind of say, you don't need to bow to statues, and you don't need to light incense, and you don't need to offer candles, and you don't need to do any of that. That all that is required is to have the capacity and the ability to be honest and to build concentration and to gain insight. An honest kind of sense of integrity, and to follow the Buddha Dharma and see for yourself what is what. So that's kind of the intro into both my experience and why I've always kind of loved this. Actually, this book I got at the monastery, and I've carried it in my bag. I think I got it in 2004, and I've taken it, and that's usually the way I get, just like the way I get band shirts, like you go to the concert, like you don't just like order online. Although you can order it online. That's the way I feel about kind of some of the books that most of the books that I have, that I work with. I've met the teacher, I've experienced the practice, and then I've decided, okay, I'll read a book. Yeah. Let's see. So I was there, and so I've experienced it, and that's part of why I want to bring in Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, because he died in like 87, 88, so 32 years ago, and they lived at the same time. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu and Ajahn Chah lived at the same time, and they were contemporaries, and they were kind of like fist bumping each other, like, good for you, fight the system, find your own freedom, find your own path. And so they were in some conferences together, and had high regard for each other. All right, so now down to the kind of what is it that I wanted to focus on the many facets of Buddhism, from Buddhadasa Bhikkhu and kind of the bits of excerpts from this book. So basically, the way that the Buddhadasa Bhikkhu would just kind of translate the Dharma or translate Buddhism depended on, what works for you. And so we gave a few different examples. The one, Buddhism as truth, like we've kind of talked about a little bit. Buddhism, like you can see Buddhism through the lens of truth. And what does that truth mean? That kind of ultimate truth through penetrating into the practice. What truth is revealed? Well, the three characteristics of existence are the truth that the Buddha is talking about, and that is illuminated in this kind of view. And that being the truth of suffering. There is suffering. I'm pretty sure that just about everyone can agree that there is suffering in this world, regardless of the, Mother Teresa's. Absolutely, there's suffering in the world. The Dalai Lama, the Pope, bishops, whatever. What are they called? Evangelistics, the evangelists. Everyone, there's suffering here. I mean, and maybe more than ever. I don't know. Apparently leprosy was a really big deal. So suffering is a noble truth, right? The truth of the characteristic of anicca, impermanence, that which arises passes away. Nothing lasts. Everything is constantly changing, constantly in flux. This is the second characteristic of existence, from the Buddhist perspective. This kind of understanding, and we could see this, we could note, just like we can see and know suffering is real, and it arises and it can pass away too, which is the second characteristic of anicca. That which arises passes away. Life is constantly changing, fluctuating, reality. The third characteristic is known as anatta, or not self, or actually more accurately, not soul. And what that means is this was the Buddha's way of kind of saying, like, all of that ritualistic, all of that, like, paying Brahmins and to worship and having to donate to the church and all that stuff, that's not going to save you, because what is there to save? You're saved at the end instead of now. So in Hinduism, there is this philosophy, there's this teaching of Atman, and Atman means soul. And so the idea is that there's a soul, and that it's persistent beyond the plane of this body. And whether you believe that or don't believe that it's totally up to you. It's totally okay, and you don't need to not believe that there's a soul in order to find meditation and anapanasati or Buddhism helpful. I want to be really clear about that. But the Buddha basically stepped out against saying, like, there's no soul that I found. I can't find it. I've tried. I almost killed myself trying. And that which is understood by one who has seen all things, apparently, through mental clarity and power, and through really going into anicca, the impermanent nature of things. So this kind of idea of there's no fixed and permanent self. So that's where the no self came from, anatta. There's no fixed and permanent self. all things are changing, even this body, even this earth, even this universe. Everything is moving, everything is changing, nothing is lasting. That which arises passes away ultimately. And so that was a rebellion against Atman, or if you want to save your soul, you have to give me these, these shekels and go and bow 3,000 times and ring that bell and, walk on your hands and, you know what I mean? Dunk yourself in a river, so the Buddha's third characteristic is basically kind of in contrast to that. So that's Buddhism as truth. The next aspect is Buddhism as religion. And he was like, Buddhism is a religion. It's also, truth, but it's also a religion. And one of the ways in which I like to kind of view this is either a kaleidoscope, like if you think about a kaleidoscope and how you can turn a kaleidoscope and then the whole shift changes, but all of the little pieces are the same. There are the several little pieces, but it all shifts as soon as you make one turn. Or even the prism of a crystal. Like if you shine a light through a crystal, it will project a certain, prism on the wall. But then if you turn that crystal slightly, it's going to alter and change, but it's the same crystal. It's the same light, right? So this is kind of a way of viewing not only Buddhism and the multifacets, but also our minds, our lives. I think it's a good way of viewing how, we like to think about this idea of kind of not self, like how many incarnations have you had in this one life? How many different prisms of your crystal, of the parts that are existing? How many incarnations have you had? And can it change? Yeah, always. So Buddhism as religion, a system based on morality, concentration, and insight. So this idea of kind of Buddhism bases religion is like, okay, there's a system and, it's some kind of a codification. There's some rites and rituals that have been kind of tapped onto it. Although, some of the Thai forest tradition and, as you found within Against the Stream, we're not really into the rituals as much because neither was the Buddha. The Buddha was like, no, that's not what we're doing here. That's not what we're doing here. The Buddha was like, no, we're not lighting candles and burning incense. Fine if you want to do that. It's not going to save it's not going to relieve you of suffering. It's only going to make you feel better in the moment because you like the smell, right? And then once the smell changes, then there's going to be a different experience. And so really that's what we're looking at, working at. It's not conditioned. It's the unconditioned happiness, enlightenment, nibbana. So but the religious system built up around, the codification of the teachings, probably about 200 years after the Buddha died, as when there was a major split between Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism, and then there were like codifications and was basically in man's hands, man meaning kind of humankind, after that. Again, which is not all bad. Like it's good. We've needed that. That's useful for some people. I've been in countries where that's their religion. Their religion is kindness. Their religion is insight. Their religion is Buddhism by and large. I've also been in countries where Buddhism was the religion with the number one precept of non-harming or non-killing, and seen, Buddhist people and or monks fighting and killing Muslims, and Muslims fighting and killing, Buddhists, and it's wild, but it's a reality, especially when it becomes more religiosity and not so much the teaching itself. Okay, so Buddhism as psychology, one of my favorites. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu talks about Buddhism as psychology, which is kind of understanding the mind. And there actually is a whole what's the word? Like a whole book or a whole series of teachings called the Abhidhamma. And the Abhidhamma is basically the psychological approaches to to Buddhism or the Buddhist teachings or the Dharma, the Abhidhamma, which is basically like understanding the mind, which I've studied some of, and some of it's super confusing, but maybe it's more will be revealed for me. And some of it is I've found to be very useful. So as psychology, and of course we've kind of taken this also with like refuge recovery, and now we're studying East-West psychology, and that's what I studied in college, and Buddhist psychology. And so there's a way in which actually even taking the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and the finding out how we can really see the understanding psychologically of how this mind works, and how we cling, and that's the cause of suffering, and how we can free ourselves from suffering. And that means also freeing ourselves from the past, which is where a lot of our suffering psychologically lies. I don't know if you've seen that. I'm sure you have. So Buddhism as philosophy is, the next kind of area, the next kind of prism, the next facet that the Buddha talks about, and that Buddhadasa Bhikkhu kind of talks about. Not the Buddha, but Buddhadasa Bhikkhu. And seeing Buddhism as philosophy, also another, I think us in the States, in the Western world, we like these ideas of kind of psychology and philosophy, and it fits for us. It's like, okay, if it's not religious, then we're into it. And some people really want the religiosity that's connected to some aspects of Buddhism, which is totally fine. Personally, psychology and philosophy have been the reasons that I have been continued to be interested in the understanding of Buddhism. So what's Buddhism as philosophy? Well, it's the scientific method, right? This kind of, that there is also, it's phenomenology. So from the science of mind perspective, which is an aspect of philosophy, that from the science of mind perspective, there is phenomenology, that conditionality, the kind of understanding of the unfolding process found within anicca, found within anatta. And then the methodology, the scientific method, which is, have an experience, become awakened, and then reproduce that experience, teach others, right? So there's, and then it can get replicated, such as the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So there's two more aspects, and then I'll open up for some questions or reflections. But the two more aspects are Buddhism as art of life. Buddhadasa Bhikkhu talked about that, that this is about living a life worth living. And so seeing Buddhism as a path to living the art of life, right? Which is very kind of Zen in some way, yeah. And then he goes on to kind of talk about it as, developing skill in a practice, developing competence in, or confidence, but competence in that practice or in the Dharma, and then to be admirable in our everyday affairs, right? To be blameless, to be at ease, to be living with grace. And this is the art of living, the art of life through the prism of Buddhism. And then last is Buddhism as culture. And I find this to be really an interesting thing, having studied, cultural anthropology and seeing the different ways that, one of the ways it was described to me is that Buddhism is like tofu, that it mixes well with whatever it's cooked with. It takes on the flavor of whatever it's cooked with, right? This, because tofu by itself kind of bland, but you add a little soy sauce and some beans and some, then it becomes another thing. And so the idea of Buddhism as culture is if that's, if you really look at all of the different expressions that we have of Buddhism, we have Tibetan Buddhism, which is a cultural overlay. We have Zen Buddhism, which is a cultural overlay. We have a Korean and Chinese and Thai and Burmese and Sri Lankan and American Buddhism, actually. When Buddhism came to America from many different facets in the late 60s, early 70s, it's now been here a long time and taken on the flavor of America in some ways, which is what I think, which is what I appreciate, which is what I think the way that's what we're trying to do here at Against the Stream is really come from, that there's this anarchist, there's this kind of, let's, have some fight like civil rights and like the other things that just fit really well within the Buddhist understanding. So the cultural aspect of Buddhism is seeing how it represents itself within a culture. And instead of cultural appropriation, right, like, which can happen and it does happen, and the idea of like Buddhism is bigger than the culture that it's, housed in, right? So just the fact that tofu takes on the flavor of, say soy sauce or soybeans or something, it's still tofu. It just has taken on the flavor. And I think that can be true within the essence of what is Buddhism without its influence, by itself. So I guess maybe there's a reason I wore my sweater tonight, because I was doing a bit of a scholastic lecture. But I found this is one of the things I love about Buddhadasa Bhikkhu, because like I said, he was a scholarly monk that then rebelled against the higher ups and did his own thing. And then he shredded it all down and said, like, none of this, matters. Let's just sit and breathe and see the truth in nature. So we have maybe time for one question or clarification. People are already kind of moving on. So thoughts, questions?
Hello.
Hey.
Everyone. Yeah, just so I get that Ajahn Chah and Buddhadasa Bhikkhu were contemporary, I would say enemies, or not enemies, but you know what I mean. They, different thoughts,
Yeah.
Same idea. So are they both Theravadan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Theravadan Buddhism is primarily Southeast Asia. So known as the narrow path, or the opposite of Mahayana. It's also sometimes talked about, great question here, Hiram. It's talked about as the northern school and the southern school. And the northern school can be considered like China, Tibet, Korea, Japan. Those are all kind of northern hemisphere. And then southern hemisphere being kind of Southeast Asia, Sri Lanka, parts of India, Thailand, Burma, right? So that's kind of northern, southern. So that's another way to look at it that's not so divisive.
Okay, I was under, at first I was like, oh, okay, he's talking, maybe should I read this? Should I not read it? But I get it. Yeah, that clears up a whole lot. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. No, Buddhadasa Bhikkhu and Ajahn Chah were friends. They were friends that had the same mission, which was to find the truth in the Dharma and pass that on to Westerners and anyone, regardless of religion or color or, So let's see, I'm just trying to look at, looks like maybe, did you find you found a PDF? Looks like Mike found a PDF on Buddhadasa, yeah, on buddhanet.net, which is another good resource, yeah. And it might be Handbook for Mankind, which I'm kind of assuming it is. So I'll be picking apart some of this over the next, several weeks. There's several chapters. I'm not going to go through kind of all of it, but really pick out what I feel like is relevant to this group. And I just kind of wanted to do an overview of some of the kind of the orientation that Buddhadasa Bhikkhu comes from, and why I have been so kind of turned on by him and his teachings. So, and found a lot of influence in the practice. All right, so we're just about out of time. Thank you, Mike, for putting up so there's a link to a book. There's some stuff happening. We're about to do a book study here at Against the Stream. There is also, you can always, give us some donation, which we could really benefit from as we're still trying to pay the rent on a pretty large space, even though there's no one there. But hopefully that'll change soon as people begin to get vaccinated and the numbers go down, and then we'll start having day-longs and meetings again, and retreats. And I think there's already a retreat on the books for later in 2021, so keep an eye out. Yeah, thank you for your time and attention. Let's just take a moment and bring in all the goodness of our practice, all of the the merit of our practicing, our listening to the Dharma, the understanding that we don't only do this practice for our own liberation, for our own freedom from suffering, but also for the liberation of all beings, to spread goodness in the world through our own hearts and minds. May we all be free.